Thank you for staying throughout the whole day, because I know you're really tired right now, and thank you for being here at my presentation. I'll be talking about Drupal, Angular, and single-page applications. And to set the expectations right, that's a beginner's talk. So if you have experience with Angular and the Drupal RESTful API, probably you won't learn anything new, but still you can stick around and hear about it. So my name is Kanchev. I work for SiteGround. We're a web hosting provider. We don't focus only on Drupal. Drupal is a big part of our business. And in terms of Drupal, I take care of our enterprise customers there. You may know us as the company that gives away socks at conferences. And we like to say that Drupal rocks our socks. And I think some of you probably got some of our socks in the beginning of the conference. And I live in Sofia, Bulgaria, which is about 1.5 hours, 150 minutes to get here. But the truth is that just before Iron Camp, I was in Washington for PHP World, so I flew all the way from the States. And before I start the presentation, I actually need to fulfill a promise to that guy. I don't know if some of you know them, but if there are people from Belgium here, they probably know him. That was a conference. That's a conference he organizes in Belgium called PHP Benelux, and I would say it's amazing. And if you guys want to go to a good quality PHP conference, it's the place to be at the end of January. So Michelangelo says, say hi there to the folks, and I strongly recommend it. So single-page applications. Before I get to Drupal and Angular, I would tell you a little bit of history about single-page applications. So Michael told us about the future, and I'm going to tell you about the history. So what exactly is a single-page application? How do you define it? The short answer that I give to most people is that picture, and that's a screenshot of Gmail. So Gmail was probably the first website that emerged to a truly single-page application. And it's the brightest example for me, personally. The Gmail interface has evolved over the years, and it's a classical single-page application. So an application like Gmail loads everything from the first load, and after that, you just change parts and bits of the pages through Ajax. The URL in the browser could change, but in reality, the address is just changing in the address bar. So that's not a different page. You're getting there. So you can use HTML5's push state, and I'll talk about that in a while. So before single-page applications, we had Web 2.0, which was about 10 years ago. Before that, it was just static HTML. And people were talking about rich internet applications, Flash, Silverlight, and after that, Ajax emerged. So we're using Ajax to change like certain parts of the document object model of the browser. But when Ajax occurred, is it really a technology or a generator of many issues? And over the years, I've heard many developers, mainly backend developers, that Ajax is just a pain that they don't want to deal with. But why? One of the reasons is that crawlers, and Google in particular, did not understand JavaScript in the beginning. So you would see problems such as my back button is not working, you click it and then everything disappears, or you click the reload button and you see a blank page. And you can't also preserve the state of the page. So you change something with Ajax, after that reload the whole page and boom, you're back to nothing. So preserving the page state was difficult. Also, SEO experts, they hated it, mainly because at that time, because crawlers were not able to crawl the pages, they were not able to get certain information from the page, and they just got the initial state of the website. So in order to address that issue, Google introduced the so-called hashtag convention. So whenever you click a button, let's say it's an e-commerce site and you get a certain product and you change to a different color, you just add hashtag yellow version or whatever. So that was kind of tricky to play around with, because you had to bear in mind that for every action you make with Ajax, you have to come up with a new version in there. And also debugging, testing, and running thousands of custom JavaScript code was, let's be honest, difficult. So Google introduced that naming convention, so they can support people that actually want to be on the edge of things and go on and use the technology. And after that, in 2008, some new JavaScript engines appeared, like the V8 engine of Chrome, the Nitro in Safari and TraceMonkey in Firefox, which was a big thing, because people were doing animations, and it looked like Flash is going to die soon, and all the major browsers released the engines at that time. 2 years later, those frameworks were released. And Angular is not new. It's 2010, as you can see, React also. But why we're using it and it's so popular nowadays? Why it was not so popular then? So for me, two things are very important in order to get where we are today. The first thing is HTML5 push state. So when that was released in 2012-13 and transitions in media queries in CSS3, everyone was hyped because you could have control of your application in the browser and change the address in the browser without actually using the strange convention that Google introduced. So with CSS3, we also moved some of the so-called presentation code from JavaScript to CSS, which was good. And the turning point for me personally, because at that moment, I didn't really look into single-page applications, was a blog post by Google, which was published on October 15th last year. And if you're following their blog, you will know that at that point, they pretty much said, we're deprecating that strange crawling scheme. So as long as our crawler has access to your JavaScript files and your CSS files, we're already crawling your website as a modern browser. We will be able to use the push state of HTML5. We will be able to see the changes on your pages. And when they did that, they pretty much told everyone, we are using single-page applications for years, because Gmail was already using that. Now it's time for you to do it, because that's the future. So what are the advantages of using single-page applications? It forces you to segregate your code and decouple your architecture as much as possible. So this also leads to better API design, because you have to think about how you're going to present the information. It allows you to heavily cache your content, because at that moment you have your data store, which could be Drupal, could be another application or a custom API, and you have the presentation layer, and it's just HTML, pure HTML. You could put it on any CDN and load it throughout the world. Another thing is that you will obviously have better UX, because users will have the feeling they're interacting with an application and they don't have to wait so much time for a page to load, for example, because you can preload everything. Of course, using a good architecture will get you to a highly available setup. So if you use a single-page application, you can always design for failure, which means that you can have version 1, version 2 of your API, and for example, if a request to the newest version of the API fails, you can send the same request to the old version, or have another instance of your API in another data center, which is easily achievable. And to be honest, highly available setup and failover is believed to be the only solution for enterprise projects right now. You can't really rely that your API will be up and running all the time. So right here, I would like to show you what better control you have in case you're using a single-page application. So if you have an error on your server side, let's say the server is overloaded, service is unavailable, or the gateway timeout. In that case, with a traditional application, when you're using PHP to generate everything, you pretty much can't do anything. I mean, you are already there where the server is experiencing issues, and you're going to get calls from people that the website's not working. You either have to work to scale out horizontally or vertically, and you have to work on production, which is, you don't have control in the browser also. The other thing that could happen is on the request side. So your client could be experiencing local problems with their internet service provider, or DNS issues, or internet routing issues. In that case, the browser cannot do anything if this is the first load of the website, because no resources have been cached and you cannot actually make full page caching, so the browser will not have any information. If it's a consequent load, then the reload button may be clicked if DNS round robin is used, for example. So the browser will request the website from the other IP address that you have somewhere set up in another data center. But to be honest, the user may not know about it, so the user may not click the reload button, and not to mention that browsers have their different implementations. So for example, when I tested the last time with Firefox, it needed about 60 seconds to actually update its DNS cache to see that the website could actually be resolved to another IP address. With Angular, if the app is loaded, if you have the JavaScript file in the browser, you have your control in the browser, and you can solve all of these issues. In that case, the Angular application could retry the request after 3 seconds or 4 seconds, or it depends on your code. You can also fail over to another API instance or to another geographical region. And you can also do even more cool stuff with it. Let's say your user is in Mexico and you have 3 instances of your API, one in the States, one in Europe, and one in South America. And depending on the distance to each API, you can set score. And actually, if you check the code which is used by Facebook, they're doing something similar. Also, you can apply that not in terms of the distance between the user and the data center, but you can measure what is the response time of every API. So you can get the reply from the first one which replies. So you send the request to all of the APIs, and after that, the first one that gives you the response, you just handle it, and that's it. The rest are ignored. And the cool thing that I mentioned is that you can get the whole application and put it on CDN. So even if your API sites are down, you will be able to cache a big part of the application, and the user will not see just a blank page or just an ugly HTML error page that you can generate if you're using a traditional method. But if you're using a front-end application, then you can do that. So in order to recap, single-page applications have been born throughout the last 10 years. And right now we're on the rise, mainly because now crawlers support it. There is better support in terms of frameworks. I'll be talking about Angular, but you can do the same with React, with Ember. It doesn't matter. So single-page applications are the future. And want it or not, we need to dedicate more time into developing those and learning about those. They also offer a better UX and forces you to have better segregation and focus on better architecture for your websites. So the second part of the application will be, of course, some overview of Angular with some code examples. So I would like to say that the examples here are Angular 1 related. So it's not Angular 2, where you have support for TypeScript, but I won't be talking about mobile. So if you want to start learning about Angular, I do encourage you to go for version 1. Not because version 2 is super unstable or something, but you will get the general idea. And after that, it will be easier for you to transition to Angular 2. Actually, we've checked both version 1 and 2, because we're building our new version of our control panel in Angular, and we've decided to go for version 1. Mainly because there's more documentation, it's better tested, and our developers are more experienced in it. So for us, it was the logical move. So remember the old days when we needed to change something with JavaScript? That's how we used to do it. Get element by ID, and after that you have your own code and do something. And after that it was jQuery selectors. jQuery is not dead. I'm not saying you have to stop using it, but with Angular, if you want to dynamically update something, one line of code most of the time. And it's super easy. And just one example here. Let's say that you have hello greeting, you need to change the text. Well, somebody's typing in jQuery, you constantly loop for when a button is pressed, and after that you display that. which is okay. It works most of the time. But that code, when you look at it, it could be just 2 lines with Angular. You just include the application and define the ng model here, hello name, that's it. So Angular is an MVC framework. And as an MVC framework, most of the backend developers are familiar with the ideas. So it's easier for a backend developer to start using Angular than any other applications, at least in my experience. So the view is the generated HTML and CSS that you're using and that your users actually see at the end. The controller here is your custom code, and actually through controllers you connect to your APIs, get your data from there. And the model works together with the view. Most of the time you have two-way data binding, so whenever you change something in the view, it could also be updated in the model and the other way around. So it's basic stuff that most programmers know, and it's easier to get started with it. So when talking about controllers, I'll just show you a pretty quick example here. Yeah. So we have 2 files, our JavaScript code and our index.html. And the JavaScript code is super simple. Oops, sorry. So you have an API. In that case, that's an API that simply returns JSON, and it jokes about Chuck Norris. At the end, you define how many you would like. And after that, in the index.html, nope, I don't want to delete that. You have your main controller right here, and you just loop through the data you got. So in order to do that, you're using ngRepeat. You loop through the data, and you display the ID and the joke itself. So let me see. Yep. And when you click the button, you just get new 3 jokes every time. The really cool thing about that is that you're transferring super small parts of information. And you can do the presentation and cache everything. So another cool thing that I'm going to be talking about in a little while is that you can do filters in here, like currency, for example. So if you know that that is a price of a product, come on, and you click fat jokes, you get instantaneous pricing. So you don't need to worry about stuff like that. And other filters you can apply, let's say I want that to be uppercase, and you get the text uppercase. So no need to write some custom code. It's all there in the framework, and at the same time, it's really easy to move that to the presentation. So you don't have to custom code that for yourself. And as you saw, it's like 5 lines of code to do that. So let's get back to that keynote. So yeah, as I mentioned, the features of AngularJS is that it uses two-way data binding, and I will show you an example in a while, so how it works. Templates are part of a page that you could update dynamically, and you can have different rules for your templates in Angular. So let's say the header is defined as one template, you can have a separate code base for it, and after that, apply a single filter to that template only. Directives, this is the thing that probably you will be working the most with Angular. So ngRepeat, which was going through the data, is a directive in Angular. And there are many of those. So whenever you think that you need to do something with Angular, just check what directives are available. And if you don't have it there are many tutorials that can show you how to do it. But most of the time, like 95% of the time, if you need something, a directive will be available. So you can do it, you don't need to custom code it. Filters, the ones that I showed you, there's tons of filters in there, so you can use them too. So the overview of Angular is that before it, at least for me, it was a lot of time to develop an application and give that touch that you saw here is available through a couple of lines of code. The good thing, it's MVC-based, and the features I mentioned, that it has give you a lot of power, so you can actually take care of what the users see without developing custom code. And right down to the next part, which is how you can use the Drupal 8 API with AngularJS. So Angular works with any backend API, which returns JSON or XML or whatever. In those examples, I'm using JSON. The Drupal API is perfect for creating AngularJS applications and using Drupal as a system to manage your data. And Drupal is very good at doing that. So you have already a system which can take care of your content, of your users' data, of everything. And right now, you can use Angular on top of Drupal in order to get a better presentation layer. So I think that the future in the Drupal ecosystem will be like Drupal will continue to be used for its strengths, creation, management of content, and user data. And AngularJS, React will be used more and more to achieve better performance, high availability, and failover. So it's extremely easy to do something with Drupal and AngularJS. In order to do that with Drupal 8, you just have to install the core modules that are provided, the RESTful services. Here I've also set up the REST UI, and if you need to update information through the API, you get the basic authentication too. After that, you can set up your permissions for the CRUD methods through the API, and you can do that for every single instance. I think, yeah, that's a bad image here, but I'll show it on the website. So pretty much what I've done here is I defined that for a node, you can execute GET requests in order to get the information. And if you want, for example, for a view to be able to be edited only, so you don't want to be able to read it, but you want just to update it, you can set those permissions only through post requests to be done, or put through HTTP, and that's really awesome in Drupal. So no other CMS has that granularity of configuration. So if you compare it to WordPress, for example, in WordPress you just have a REST API, you cannot configure which object could be read-only or which one could be post-only. So if you can authorize to the API, you can do anything. And in Drupal, that's a big advantage. And once you do that, once you configure, for example, I would like to be able to see my views through the REST API, you just have to test it out. And that's just a curl request through a terminal, or you can just open your browser and you expect to see JSON in that case. So let's go back here to the website. So right here, I just have 2 articles, that's it. They're published, there is just one single line of text in them. And here is a view which I created, which lists all of those articles. And by default, when you create a view, you won't see that REST export here. So you can just create it, and the REST export, you have tons of features here. So what I did is that I exported the content, the ID of the articles, and also their body, and I've set that URL here. So if I open it, I expect to see just a JSON with those articles. Yep, there you go. So with Angular, what you can do is the exact same way that I got those jokes, I just changed the API, and after that, through ng-repeat, I'm getting the ID and the body of everyone, and I'm just fetching the post. However, one thing that I'll show you is the two-way data binding that I mentioned. So I'm fetching the post, you have the ID, you have the title, and right now, if I want to filter them, with Angular, you just start typing here, and the two-way data binding updates the HTML, which I think for a couple of lines of code is pretty awesome. Because if you have to do that manually, probably you won't be able to do it like for 5 minutes, and that's how much time I needed to do it for the presentation. So after that, you see that it's dynamic, searching for something that's not here, deleting, it gets all the way back. Configuring the resources is easy through the UI. You can also do it exactly the same way in the YAML file, but it depends. If you want to put it in version control, use the YAML file directly. If you want to use the UI just for testing or for a simple part of your website, you can do it through the UI. So for example, if I want to be able to update that same article, I should also put, instead of get here, the post request, so I can change the content. And you can do that for pretty much everything in Drupal. Custom blocks, custom block types, menu items, stuff like that. And that's really powerful. So to recap, Drupal 8 works pretty nice with all of those frameworks that allow you to create single-page applications. And it's really easy to go and create an application that will be able to act just as the front layer of your website, and you can use Drupal for everything else. With that, I think I can go to questions, because I'm in front of time. But before I answer them, you can take a picture of that. I also have the presentation online. You get the URL at the end. So all of those are great for beginners. And I strongly advise you to check the session from DrupalCon LA, which was amazing. There is a great tutorial by Drupalize, and of course the documentation for the RESTful services. Also, if you have a contrib module which you would like to be able to use through the REST API, but it's not RESTified, and you want to know how to make your module actually be able to be exposed through the REST API, those are the two tutorials and the GitHub repo related to the above blog post. So the moment when developers start doing that by default, you will be able to do pretty much anything with single-page applications. Right now, you're a little bit limited, because if you have an e-commerce module or another module which is not RESTified, you really can't take advantage. So right now, you can manage the content, the articles, the notes, you can manage users, you can update data, but anything more than that, if you just want to use a contribute module, then it should be RESTified. And if you really are looking into single-page applications, I strongly encourage you to get one of the modules that you are already using and give back to the developers that created them. So this way you will help many people to be able to move forward with Drupal and go to the future. Everything is available here, so if you want to get the URL addresses of the tutorials and everything, just go to my SlideShare account and get the slides. And I'll go back to the question slide. So if you have any questions, now's the time. If no questions. There's a question? Yeah?
Do you have some experience with offline storing of entities in a browser?
To be honest, no. But we can sit down and check it out, because it's also interesting for me to see that. And if there are any other questions? Yeah.
I sit down the whole morning tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, then if there are no other questions, I went to Vienna last year, and the premiere of the Drupal cinema zapping was amazing. I don't know how many of you were there. I think, yeah, you guys were there, obviously. But I strongly advise you to go. It's a lot of fun, and see you there. So thank you.